Welcome in, everyone. UGA Football Live. Week 4 CFP rankings. I'm here with former Georgia tight end Artie Lynch. Has been my partner this season. We do the weekly show, and this is our live show. Decided to do a little CFP talk about the national scene. We had a shakeup in the top 4 today, Artie. So first off, how are you, my brother?
I'm
And
good.
what do you think about that top 4? I'll let you get
I'm
into it.
good. First and foremost, happy early Thanksgiving to you, to everyone who's listening. It's my favorite holiday of the year for so many reasons, mainly family, football, and some food.
Yeah.
But I kind of had this. I felt like there was going to be some shakeup. I think it's a little bit unfair to Florida State, which is contradicting everything I said last week. But I don't necessarily think they're wrong. I just think that Washington should have been ahead of Florida State like 5 weeks ago. So I think they're getting it right. I just think it's like odd timing that you're going to do it after that they lost their starting quarterback. You know what I mean? It just seems kind of like okay. But I think they've got it right so far. And the my favorite thing about the last 2 weeks in college football is there's always just so many big time games, and I think everything will play out the way it's supposed to here in the next, you know, 4 days. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I was thinking. So we knew the top was going to be changed, but
Mm-hmm.
that Florida State and Washington, that was really the bulk of the conversation around this,
Totally.
and deservedly so. I mean, Jordan Travis, prayers up and thoughts for him. I mean, that was you never want to see a player go out like that at all. And I think college football fans are on the same boat there, especially the Florida State faithful. Um, he was having a great season, and they looked like that team who could really make a splash as really an unheralded program going into the this season at least, right? Had the history and everything, but they haven't done much. And now, boom, it looks like a perfect season for them. Even though they have close games here and there, they found a way to win. But now, without him, it really reminded me, and I think Reese Davis brought this up during the broadcast as well, was, Cardell Jones at Ohio State, when he
Mm-hmm.
took him on that run and he had to come in for Barrett there. Reminds me of the same situation. It sounded like, at least from the committee chairman, that they're fully aware that the Florida State has a chance to prove themselves with that backup in the next couple of weeks because they are in the ACC championship, right?
Mm-hmm.
By playing Louisville, and then this week is, of course, in that matchup and that rivalry. I just think he has a chance here and see what they do. Washington. I heard something as well that they haven't won by more than 10 points since mid September,
Right.
right? So can we kind
Mm-hmm.
of? I think a lot of this maybe aura we have for Washington, even though they had a great win. I mean, I watched the whole game with Oregon State. They played well. I think they could have beat them by a lot more than they did, right? Some stuff didn't go their way in the late, and Oregon State and DJ, they came back. But, I think we're kind of looking at that start they had and that win over Oregon, and we're riding that momentum still now a bit, right? Because we know that defense has issues. Michael Penix, really good. What happens when they play a really good offense like they did in Oregon again? Because me and you both agree that Oregon, we like Oregon over Washington.
100%.
I wouldn't be mad if Oregon was at number 4. Thing that's getting Oregon, I think, at least from the committee's perspective, is their best win is against Utah, who is now out of the top 25. So really, their best win is losing to Washington in the last seconds, right?
Right.
So
I
that's
do
interesting
think
to me.
to that point, though, it's like, and this is where, like, it's like the committee is giving themselves an out with Florida State right now, and which I get. Again, I get it. I just think they could have done this 4 weeks ago, and there wouldn't be as much controversy around it because I'm sure there's tons of controversy going on Twitter and social media and so on and so forth. I think if Oregon blows out Oregon State this weekend and then follows that up with a win against Washington, I will be very interested to see. And if Florida State wins out, I would be very interested to see if Oregon jumped both Florida State and Washington, um, just because of the way the committee has publicly stated how they factor in major injuries, and they factor in, like, where is this team now, not like, the whole body of work, which I think is it will be telling. Obviously, it's 2 weeks from now, so that's a lot of football to be. And I just think them moving Florida State at this juncture is giving them permission structure to have either number current number 6, 7, or 8 leapfrog them, right?
Yeah.
And potentially have an undefeated conference championship out of the top 4.
Yeah, I think you're right. And does that, and this is speculation at this point, you know, is the way that Alabama is playing right now messing with their heads? Because it's messing with everybody else's.
What
Because
do you mean?
like you said, I think they're setting that up a little bit, maybe not purposefully, but maybe just subconsciously doing it because they know the Crimson Tide and Nick Saban are back, playing their best ball this season. They're right there at 8. Because I'm hard pressed to say that Alabama's not playing some of the best ball in the country, and I would take them and Georgia and Alabama 1 and 2. I don't know. To me, I'm kind of leaning towards that, dude.
I honestly think, and I have no idea what's going to happen in that SEC championship game. Georgia's playing really good football right now. I wouldn't bet against them, but those games they've been battles, right? Ever since 2012, they've been battles, minus that one home game in 2014 or 15. But look, if Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, there's no way Georgia falls below 4. And I think, historically speaking, from when we talk about conspiracy theories, the highest rated college football playoff games in the past 5 years have been the games between Georgia and Alabama. And so I think if the committee could somehow end up with like a Georgia Alabama playoff game again, they wouldn't be upset, right? Yeah. Obviously, if Georgia wins out, and Alabama's done. But I just think them bumping Florida State to 5 is giving them permission structure to allow an Oregon, a Texas, or an Alabama to get in there, even with an undefeated team in Florida State, because they clearly are showing or they're clearly telling everyone what they're thinking, and that's a Florida State without Jordan Travis is not a top 4 football team. So if a Florida State without Jordan Travis wins 2 more games, they're still not a top 4 football team. So that's kind of how I view it. But then again, you and I were on this about Florida State a couple weeks ago, right? We didn't think they were a bad football team. We just didn't think that they were a elite top 4 team. So
yeah. And when you look at Texas too, when you talk about Alabama and Texas has stayed, and they've stayed the same rankings throughout these CFPs. And talking about, obviously, a big thing that should be is that Big 12 championship. And there are 3 teams in a tie for that. Texas is going to play. We have 3 teams in a tie for that second spot to play.
So it's what? Oklahoma, Kansas State, Oklahoma State?
Yep. Now, I have an article pulled up that I could sit here and read and try to figure out who has the upper hand. But basically, there's a tiebreaker. It's going to be one of those 3 teams. It's hard to beat the same team twice, so I'm taking Texas, Oklahoma. Oklahoma State and Kansas State. I know Kansas State lost to Missouri early in the season. Haven't followed them that much. I haven't had to. Oklahoma State, I know, is playing their best ball this season. They've had a rise up. Do they contend with Texas with getting Quinn Ewers back and that energy spark of getting him back and playing? Probably not. So then you have Texas as a Big 12 champion. And, Alabama, they'd have to beat Georgia to get in. And then you got your either Washington or Oregon. I think it'll be Oregon. Like I said, hard to beat the same team twice, and they should have beat them in the first game. Yep. And we've seen that play out so many times. The whole beat the same team twice is so hard in a season. And then Ohio State, Michigan winner. There's not a lot of room at the top, man. I think somebody's going to get snubbed according to their fan base, what have you. Maybe it's a good decision that we all kind of agree on. Okay, I see what they did there. This gets them in. But I think this is really setting up for some drama unless we have some crazy stuff happen this week in rivalry week.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Something that I thought about watching the broadcast as well was, still having Michigan there. I think you could even make a case for Washington to be up there. In the schedule they've played, beat Oregon State. It's a tougher conference, the Pac-12, bottom to top. You know what I mean? Than the Big 12, the Big 10.
I wouldn't argue it because I know how tough it is in the SEC, but you could make an argument that the Pac-12 is the best conference this year. That's not the argument I would make, but if someone was like, here's my argument, I'd hear it out, right? So to your point, and you and I disagree on what we think of Michigan, but I agree with you that I don't think Michigan should be 3. I think Michigan should be, 4 because of the schedule. Like if
Yeah.
you're gonna, if we're gonna go by Ohio State's number 2 because of the schedule they've played, then I'm with you. Then Washington should be number 3
Yeah.
because Washington has played a tougher schedule, and maybe it's they haven't won the games that the same amount of games as Michigan has won by the same margin of victory,
Yeah. That's what
right?
it is. It's the margin of
But
victory.
but I mean, Washington has gone into some tough places and played well and won big time games. And
Yeah.
Michigan has really only done that once, and that's against Penn State. And as we know, Penn State is uh,
God awful on offense. Oh my goodness.
it's a good team, not a great team.
No.
Good
And if they
defense, good
had
special
a
teams.
dude, if they had a mid-tier offense, they'd
It's like
be
a better
good.
version of Iowa, basically, is
Yeah.
what we're
I mean,
talking
that's
about.
how I look at it. And it's no hate to the Big Ten. I just call it like I see it. And I think a lot of people will agree that's what the Big Ten is missing. I think that's why, and if I'm in that committee room too, is trying to judge Ohio State and Michigan with the offenses that are played in that conference and that themselves pose. Because we saw JJ McCarthy last week did not look good. He
No,
didn't,
yeah.
straight up did not. And that's against Maryland. And Maryland, and as far as Big Ten defenses go, Maryland is one of the worst in that conference. Right now, their
So
offense, we thought they might give them a little trouble. We called it last week. We're like, hey, Maryland, to his brother, they might get Tagovailoa like Georgia did at one time. Go ahead, go ahead.
So JC, I was reading something by Bruce Feldman, or listened to him rather, and he's obviously a pretty prominent college football reporter, and he pointed out that uh, JJ McCarthy's worst statistical performances in his college career, from like yards per attempt, attempts, completions, touchdowns, have been when Jim Harbaugh is not on the sideline. And it's pretty interesting if you look at his stats over the season, and because we forget Harbaugh was not there at the beginning of the season for like 2 or 3 games, right? He's
Yeah.
only coached like 5 games this year.
Mm.
And McCarthy was asked about it, and he said he was like, "I get an extra boost, like emotionally, psychologically, from when coach is on the sideline." So I'm not saying that he is a terrible quarterback and is not going to, but there is a correlation there, right? And
Mm.
and I think you're when you're the quarterback and your head coach was a college quarterback and an NFL quarterback, and kind of is known for developing QBs, like him, hate him, indifferent about him. Harbaugh is a kind of a quarterback guy. I think that matters, right? And I think it matters in big time games. I think it matters for a quarterback who has all the talent in the world, but has not had the consistency that, say, Carson Beck has had this year, or even, the guy Milrow has had this year, or to be honest, McCord, who I don't really love, but has gotten better over the season. And McCarthy has been shaky the past couple of weeks. So I think that matters. And some people say it doesn't matter not to have your head coach. Totally disagree. I think having your head coach on the sideline is a big deal.
Yeah, and that was a question I think for everyone, which is how much would that affect the team, at least him being there the entire week and not being on the sideline. Now, my first thought was if I'm a Michigan fan, great. I mean, he could still be there during the week. He's still involved heavily in the game plan, still making the
100%.
decisions. Already, he could write up an Excel doc of whatever thing he wants done come Saturday. And so I was like, okay, that might be better. Now, to your point, and Bruce Feldman's, it has looked a little weird there because, it's not, I don't think it's good. And Michigan fans will definitely disagree with me here. I don't think it's good or beneficial to run the ball 38 straight times or whatever they did to win that game. You didn't
No,
have to do that. You have the athletes to match up in space. You do. You're not using them. So you just said, okay, offensive line, we're scared we're going to lose this game. We'll run it. How my question would be there as a coach was, if we do this now, we're really that scared that we're going to lose this game. If we do this now, what does that make our players think about our scheme and our system? And how does that prepare us later in the season to take on a team like Ohio State? And then if we do get past them, go to the playoffs and play balanced teams. You're not going to win doing that. And you line up and do that against Georgia, they're just going to eat that cake all day.
I
They
totally
tried
agree.
to do that in 2021. I know that's 2 years ago, but most of that staff's still the same. The offense they run, you can't argue that's not the same. So that's one question for me. And I think also, and you're talking about Kyle McCord there in Ohio State. Do we know that he's gotten better, or because of the competition that they've played? I know there's better defenses in the Big Ten, so usually teams they play tough, but they haven't played competition either. So it's like, other than Penn State, Notre Dame, which seems like miles away from the schedule now at this point in the year. That's my question for me. I think honestly, I don't know what this. I'm trying to look up this under in this game real quick. The game, which is kind of funny name,
So to
but
the point about Kyle McCord, I don't disagree with you. I just think he's gotten more comfortable, and I think that they've got a run. They've got a legitimate running game right now. Their offensive line has improved, and
yeah,
it's
they
just
got the
like,
running back. They got Henderson back, I believe, and
yeah.
he looked good last week.
And I guess what I'm saying is, like, when you're in Ohio State, right? You're one of four, maybe five programs that have uber talented players everywhere, right? And there's tons of turnover because guys get drafted in the first 3 rounds, multiple guys every year. Obviously, we're talking about Georgia, we're talking about Alabama, we're talking about LSU, talking about Texas, talking about Ohio State, right? So it's like, I just think that Ohio State in particular lost a ton of guys. Really, a lot similar to Georgia. There's probably only one other team, the second most drafted guys in the past 3 years, probably Ohio State versus Georgia. So I think Ohio State this year has not looked great at times, but has found ways to win and gotten better each week, right? Collectively as a unit. And I think they're doing what Alabama has done, just a little bit quieter and maybe not as giant of a step each week as Alabama has made, right?
Yeah,
I think Alabama is a better football team. I'm not saying that I'm just saying that same kind of, hey, we're going to build up to it. So I liked Michigan going into this game like 3 weeks ago. I actually like Ohio State this week, just because I think they're starting to peak, right? And they're starting to have an identity a little bit more than what they did in the middle of the season. And their defense is very freaking good, right? And they've got
yeah.
athletes
I'm taking
out the
Ohio State
wazoo.
this week. I'm taking Ohio
Yeah,
State.
totally.
If I had to pick now, I don't know what I'm trying to look at the line. I know the total is 45, and I'm gonna tell you right now,
I think the
a
line's
couple.
4 and Michigan's favored.
Okay, yeah, I like Ohio State, and I'll tell you right now, one of my favorite maybe plays, if you're into that this year, would be under in that game.
Oh yeah,
40
I agree.
45. It should be 35 to me. I think
Totally agree.
that's get it now before it moves. But like, yeah, no, I like Ohio State this week, and I think you made a good point too that it's the talent they have, especially on offense,
Yeah,
right?
it's
I mean, you
like
who pick the offense because the defenses we think they're about the same, right? They played well, but they haven't played offenses that are going to spread you out. But neither of these offenses have done that. Now, Ohio State, they have the advantage of the talent. They have the advantage of having a Marvin Harrison Jr.
and a
and
Stover, tight end,
yeah,
running
and
back, Henderson.
multiple receivers, and right. I mean, Michigan has that attack with the two running backs who are good. I'm not saying they're not, but at least to get players in space and see those teams, that's how you. I mean, you got two good defenses. Who has a better offense to me? And I think Ohio State has that potential. And another thing, quick thing about Alabama too. We're kind of getting everywhere right now, but I think it's a good point to hit. SEC championship coming up. Alabama, I think the biggest surprise for me and what tells us that they were playing really good ball. And I know this was a few weeks ago now, but holding that LSU offense to 28 points was impressive to me. And we've seen what
Yeah,
Jaden Daniels has been doing every single week, and that offense has been doing. Number one offense in the SEC. They might be number one in the country or the number two. They update every week. They're either one or two. So Alabama doing that defensively, and then you have the Jalen Milroe just really taking off. And obviously, I think Tommy Rees just, I don't know if he had a heart to heart with Nick Saban or what, but they decided to use him as an athlete that he is, and it's
totally.
really, really working out for him. Which, if you're a Georgia fan, you should be worried about that game for sure.
You got to be.
Because
It's going to be the
yeah,
best team that you've played all year.
yeah,
I admit, but that's usually the case in that game. So
yeah. I mean, you played, Bama obviously in that national title. And then what happens. Tagovailoa, and then the SEC championship. 2 years ago, last time we played them there, and in the SEC championship, and what happened. I think these coaching staffs know each other very well, which makes it even more interesting already from that standpoint and schematically, right? And getting other times because they do. A lot of them worked with each other. You have the
Oh yeah,
familiarity with
totally.
systems. And then beyond that, just the athletes you have on the field for both teams. Alabama, I think they're number one team as far as blue chip ratio goes this year, either one or three, something like that, top three at least. But I believe they're one. So that is a very, very interesting game. I don't know, man.
We could save this conversation for our show this week, but you brought up and mull this over, and I'm gonna bring a use case to the topic for anyone that wants to listen to our show later in the week. When we film it, it'll be out. But the Jaden Daniels for Heisman,
Mm.
and people are talking about, oh, well, he's not on a winning team and this and that. And I got a few examples of Heisman winners over the years that have not, whose teams have not been in national championship. Some of the names, people are gonna be like, that can't be right. But when you look at the team that they played for and the year that they played for, you're gonna be like, oh, interesting. So
I know one of them.
yeah, I think we're on the same
My boy
page.
Lamar Jackson.
Okay, two then. So
Baker Mayfield.
um, I guess what I'm saying is we should have a Heisman discussion this
Mm.
week because I think there are a lot of worthy names. One of the names that came on the I always mess up that name.
Litnikoff Award.
Bolitnikoff Award. Our boy Brock Bowers is a finalist for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Only tight end to be named, and out of
yep,
9 receivers. If you don't know,
and
that award's given to the top receiver in college
top
football,
receiver.
regardless of position. So that's why he's in.
And so I think I think it's when championship season comes around, so is award season. And I think there's a lot of guys, both that we know and love for the Georgia Bulldogs, who are going to be up for nominations, right? I think Carson Beck is starting to gain some chatter. I'm not talking about Heisman per se, but we're talking about Maxwell, all SEC, and so on and so forth, right? And yeah, I think it's just a conversation that we should definitely consider having because I think it's going to be interesting as this playoff race is shaping up to be. I think there's been so many awesome individual performance by so many different types of players out there that I'm very interested to see who gets recognized at the end of the year because there's been great quarterback play across the country. There's been great receiver play and running back play. But yeah, I just always think that this time of year, usually someone kind of comes and takes the limelight out of everyone. It's typically on a championship team, but that's not really the case this year. So
No.
definitely curious.
Yeah, it's interesting from this season, the Heisman standpoint, as well as the CFP really mess that we're kind of in for, that we all kind of feel coming. I think, for the reason we already discussed, it's going to be interesting here in December 3rd, December 4th, the release show. So yeah, we'll definitely be tuning into that. And like already said, we'll have our weekly show out. We're going to give our takeaways from Tennessee briefly. Not much to talk about there, honestly. And then Georgia Tech, Deep South. Got clean old fashioned hate and already knows all about that. He'll give us little thoughts on some Georgia Tech action. I know this
I
Georgia
got
staff hates Georgia Tech too.
hates him, hates
Yeah.
him.
So
It's a deep rooted hate. It's been a lopsided rivalry for a while now, but that hate is real. It is
yeah.
real.
And I'm like, I even feel old now because I feel like the younger fans, even especially students now, they haven't ever lost to Georgia Tech, right? Oh, I
Mm-mm.
grew up losing to Georgia Tech, man. It's different, right? It's different. So we'll
Man,
definitely,
early '90s, Georgia Tech was legit. Now I think
yeah,
they have a shared national championship. Shane Gailey, Georgia guy, longtime coach. Uh, Once upon a time, they were a squad. Now, not
yeah,
so much. But I do think the coach they got now is doing a good job.
yeah,
But it ain't
yeah. I
gonna.
like Brent Key. I like Brent
Yeah.
King. I like Haynes King. So we'll talk more about that. And I believe that episode will come out Thursday. So keep tuned. The Pole Sports Network. We appreciate you joining in, guys. Drop any questions you have for us in the future in the comments. We'll get to them. Artie, it's been great. Thanks for jumping on again, man. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
All
Thank you
right,
for having me.
guys.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. All right.